Go ahead and start recording. All right, good morning. Today, I'm excited to welcome a guest speaker. Jorge Casillas is from TUPE, and we're going to be talking about vaping this morning. This is a topic I like to bring to the parents every year because there's always so much that changes within this area. And I think it's really important for parents to know like what's the latest trends because every year I learn something new. And so I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Jorge now. And as always, you guys, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. As the principal mentioned, yeah, there's always different things that change, right? So there's always something new, something different. I think this last year and a half, as you as adults have probably realized things have changed a lot, right? Being at home and then coming back into person, there's a lot of different things that normally kids kind of deal with, but they haven't dealt with in a while. I've also heard stories of kids transitioning from middle school to high school without ever physically transitioning. It was all through virtual. So today what we're going to do is we're just going to go through this information. We're going to share information about vaping and cannabis, so nicotine and cannabis. A lot of the information for some of you might be new. So as mentioned earlier, please ask your question in the chat or go ahead and just raise your hand. We'll try to answer them. I'll leave about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation just to make sure that we can answer as many questions as we can. And without further ado, I'm going to try to share the screen and hopefully the technology wants to work with us today because it always has a mind of its own. So thumbs up if you can see that big screen, hopefully. Yeah, okay. So on my end, it's saying that I can't see the big screen. So hopefully everybody can see the big screen. Can everybody see the big screen now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I'm telling you, the technology has a mind of its own. Yes, I come from the Tobacco Use Prevention Education Program out of the County Office of Education. Our job is to go to different schools and different parent groups and have this conversation. So let's get started with just the most basic of basic things. What are these things, right? You hear a lot of different names, you'll hear a lot of things. Most important to note, e-cigarette is a vape. So for us as adults, we more than likely heard the name e-cigarette back in the early 2010s, early 2010s, and now the kids are calling them vapes. It's the same thing, they just changed the name because e-cigarette doesn't sound as cool or as fun as vape. Important to note here with these products, all of these products are oil-based systems. So whenever you hear a young person use the word vape, that's very misleading. It makes you believe that it's some type of water-based or some type of aromatherapy device, but these are actually aerosolized products. So just like hairspray, just like bathroom spray, when this product is burned and it goes into their mouth and in their body, it's actually a pretty thick substance that falls into their body. So what are these things, right? Let's get started with the most basic. What are these? So they're all oil-based. But right before the pandemic, these were really popular, the cartridge and pod-based systems. Now we're seeing a lot of the disposables, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But basically what you have in these products is you have a battery. The battery then sends an electrical signal to this little cartridge or pod area. There's two little metal connectors that connect to the battery. The electrical signal goes to the points get really hot, and then they burn the actual oil that's inside of the little cartridge. It's typically kind of like a cooking oil texture. It's kind of slimy, kind of slippery. It's a little thick, so it's not like water, right? So really important to note with these products is they all contain nicotine. A lot of the times young people say, oh no, it doesn't have nicotine. It's important to note that they all have nicotine. Some have more nicotine than others, but they all have nicotine. Later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about marijuana, and that's a whole another different category, but the kids are still using them, so we have to talk about them because that's something that we're seeing at the middle school and the high school level. So what do these products look like? Some of you have probably seen some of these, and you could probably remember some of these. You mentioned the e-cigarette, right? It used to look like a cigarette and the tip would light up. Now what we're seeing are the disposable pods, like that green or the red that you see there. The one that's really popular, it's called the Puff Bar. The Puff Bar is a disposable, And the reason that they're really popular with the youth is because they come in flavors. One of the big things that we found, and through all the surveys and everything that we've asked young people, flavors are what actually attract them to these products. So there's a few reasons why they use, but the flavors are really attractive to them. So the disposable pods are the thing that they're using. So how does it work? So basically, as you mentioned in the last slide, there's a battery and a pod. Well, in the disposable, the battery and the pod are connected. So it's just one device instead of two pieces or three pieces. Basically, one of these products has about 250 puffs. After they're done with their 250 puffs, they go and they throw them in the trash. We've heard young people tell us that they get these for about $8 to $12 a pop. So if you imagine you give your young person maybe $20 a week to buy some food, they'll buy one of these and then they'll buy the rest of the money, they'll buy food. So it's interesting. This is what we're hearing. This is what they're telling us, right? So we can only imagine what they're not telling us. So it's important to note that. But the flavors are what attract young people. Here you see a thing called a wax pen. A lot of these vape pens look like that, but the wax pen that we have there is for marijuana, and we'll talk about that because it's important. Other things that we're seeing that's new, but we haven't really seen young people use it, are caffeine, melatonin, and vitamin vapes, kind of on the fringes, but it is something that we're hearing come up. And usually how it goes is we hear it and then they start using it or they start talking about it. So what are these products and why is it that they're so addicting, or why is it that it's kind of a problem for young people to use? So if you remember, you probably heard the term chain smoker. You probably remember that somebody who was a chain smoker maybe smokes 1 to 2 packs a day of cigarettes. That's anywhere between 20 to 40 cigarettes. What young people were reporting to us right before the pandemic is that they were smoking between 1 to 2 pods of Juul a day. So if you do the math, that's anywhere between 40 to 80 cigarettes worth of nicotine that they're consuming per day. That's a large amount of nicotine to enter the body for an adult, especially for a young person. The puff bar, this is, as you mentioned earlier, this is a new thing that they're using a lot of. Sorry, I'm out of the open. So what do we know about the brain and what do we know about how it works? So what we know is that that pink part of the brain, we call it the prefrontal cortex, is the last part of the brain that gets connected or gets wired in a young person's brain. That typically happens till about 25 years old. So the brain is growing, developing, and that part wires itself until someone's about 25. What we know is that that part of the brain controls judgment, memory, some emotions and feelings of pleasure. And what we know about some of the addiction science or some of the things about addiction is the more that young people make connections while they're using these products the first time, the harder it is to disconnect the memory from the use. So before I worked here, I actually worked at a residential rehab. And one of the hardest things that we had was disconnecting the youth from the experience. So we would take them to the beach, we would take them to the movies, we would take them to amusement parks, and we would ask them, hey, how's everything going? And they say, oh, well, it's all right. I mean, it's not the same. What do you mean it's not the same? What's different or what's going on? And they would say, well, in the past, when I would go out to the movies or I would go do things, my friends and I would use. So they would connect the using with the memory. So it's just important to note that, right? That we definitely want to make sure that the first time that a young person does something on their own or creates a long-lasting memory, it isn't while they're under the influence, because that then connects the usage with the memory. And that's something that we know. One of the other things that we know is that the younger that someone starts using, the more likely they are to be lifelong customers of the product. So there's a big difference between someone who starts using when they're 12, 14, compared to someone who starts using when they're 21, 22. The brain has now had more time to develop, more memories have been made, more connections have already occurred. So if we can delay onset or just have them not use it at all, it really helps them out, because the younger they are when they start using, the harder it is to get them to stop. So another thing that we also know is that the reason why we're doing this presentation on a computer and I'm not standing in front of you in a room or and maybe in an auditorium is because the lungs. We also know that these products affect the lungs. Earlier, we talked about that these are all oil-based products. So one of the big things that we also know is that right before COVID, there was a thing called EVOLI. I don't know if anyone remembers that or if anybody heard of that. Yes, no, maybe so. I see it. Yeah, see the head shake. No. Okay, so right before COVID, there was a thing going on called EVOLI. And basically, it was a respiratory disease that was affecting people who were smoking black market vapes. THC, we believe, was the vitamin E acetate that was inside of these products. And what was happening was the inside of the lung would actually get coated with the layer of oil. And what would happen is they wouldn't be able to actually compress and decompress the lungs. So they would have to get on respirators. Sadly, I think we had about 70 deaths that we could account to this. Of course, right, it was right before COVID. So once COVID hit, most of the money and the research got redirected towards that. So when you're having a conversation with young people, we always like to say it's a toolkit, right? You always want to have different tools and different things. You know how your child responds to information. Some children are really fact-based, others are really science-based, others, they like hearing stories, right? Things that kind of move them emotionally. So always try to understand how they perceive information, how they take information in, because that's usually the best way to get them. So another thing that we know, and this is really important because we know that young people are living a really interesting time where they're all on social media. I think for a lot of adults, they're also on social media, but probably not as much as adults. So what do we know? We know that they found young people on social media. Some of these individuals, if you look at the picture, you look at them, they don't look like me. And I'll play that again so you can see. They don't look like an adult, right? They look like a young, kind of hip, trendy person. If you look at these individuals, they have some trendy fashion, some trendy clothes. And if you look at the product, right, it doesn't really look like a vape. It looks like it might be some type of technology or some type of a tech product. And this is typically what they were kind of going for. Was this kind of feel that it's not really dangerous or it might not actually affect you. Another thing is the advertisements or some of the things that they see on social media. I'm not going to read this. You can read it yourself. But basically, if you read this here, right, I always ask every adult that I come in contact with, if you notice that last portion, it says parental text. I don't know how many of you are getting text messages from your parents. I know I don't really get text messages from my parents because they don't really use a phone because they're in their near 70s. But right, so how many of us are really getting text messages? So it's important to note that who they're kind of targeting and who they're looking for when they're sending these advertisements or they're putting these things out for people. So what do we know about the data for Santa Clara County? We know that 3 out of every 10 students have tried it. And we know that about 1 to 2 is an active user. So this is why we want to share this information, right? Because 3 out of every 10 have tried it, which is a pretty high amount. If you look at all the other things, they're not as high. Cigarettes, right? We basically have no kids smoking cigarettes, but this is 3 out of every 10. So other reasons why youth use, if you look at this picture, there's quite a few of the vape products and the nicotine products in there. I don't know if anybody wants to unmute themselves and see if they can find one or yell it out if they see it in the picture. Did anyone find one? So I'm going to assume that everyone's kind of looking still. So
somebody put in the chat the turquoise colored one.
Yes, that's one right there. Right next to it's another one. This here and this here are wrappers for cigarillos, which are what they use to smoke marijuana. This is a chewing tobacco gum. These two here are more vapes, right? That kind of looks like a candy. This here is also bubble gum. This is a menthol cigarette packet. And these two down here are also vapes. So it's important to know what these products look like. Like we mentioned earlier, what we know is that flavors are what attract young people. We all jumped up and we're kind of happy when we found out that they were going to ban flavors. Sadly, right now we know that it's going to go to a vote come 2022. So there's going to be a vote that the people in the state of California are going to have to vote if they want to ban flavors. Most importantly, other things that we know is young people report to us that the reason why they consume these products is because of mental health and stress. So either they're feeling anxious, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling sad, they feel, all these emotions. That's why we're hearing a lot of young people use these products. So it's important to note that because a lot of the times young people, it's the first time that they come across a stressful situation or something, and they don't have the proper coping mechanisms on how to deal with some of these issues. So it's important for us as adults to kind of teach them that. And we're going to go into that kind of towards the end of the presentation. Other thing is, where do they get these products? So 27% of them say they bought it from a store themselves, meaning they ask someone, hey, I'll give you $10 if you go in this and buy it for me. Of course, you also have those vendors that'll sell it to them illegally. You have the 32% someone bought it for them or someone gave it to them, meaning a family member, cousin, relative, older brother, sister. That's a high percentage of what we're seeing. So the next one is a small portion of internet buyage or usage. So what they typically do here is they'll get the package delivered to a friend's house or to a neighbor's house. You'll never know that the package is coming. And then what will happen is they'll pick up the package, take all the packaging out, throw everything away, and then just hold on to the vape. So that's something that we also see in this kind of realm that they do. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is marijuana and cannabis. This is an interesting topic. What we know is that people who smoke marijuana and cannabis also use nicotine, but people who use nicotine don't smoke marijuana necessarily. I'll say that again because I know it's a little confusing with the wording. So people who smoke marijuana sometimes as well consume nicotine, but people who consume nicotine don't necessarily always use marijuana. So we want to also share that information because a lot of the times they'll smoke both at the same time. One will lead to another. So that's just something that we always want to share. What are we seeing right now as it pertains to trends or things that young people are using? Are the three bottom ones are some of the most used ones right now with the young people. Edibles are highly consumed by young people. The problem with edibles, right? It's a food. I can't speak for anybody else, but if you gave me a chocolate chip cookie and you told me just to eat one bite of it, I'm probably gonna eat the whole cookie because I just like chocolate chip cookies, right? So everyone's a little different, but that's what we're seeing. They come in different forms, in brownies, drinks, potato chips, a whole bunch of different things. The other thing that is really popular with the young people are the dabs and the wax pens. The dabs and the wax are the one that are really dangerous for young people. So the same thing with the edibles, but what we're seeing with the dabs and the wax these are high concentrated forms of marijuana. So these products contain high amounts of THC. THC is the active ingredient that's in marijuana. So let's talk about that because there's a lot of questions. A lot of the time young people are gonna confront you on this, right? Or they're gonna ask you, well, isn't it medicine? Didn't you guys as adults make it legal for us, the people, to use? That is true. But there's also a distinction there. So marijuana as medicine has been legal in the state of California since 1995. So if anybody wanted to use marijuana as medicine, it's been legal since 1995. In 2016, what the voters in the state of California legalized was the recreational use of marijuana for people 21 and older, right? So that's really important here. It's 21 and over. Anyone under 21 is not allowed to use it, not allowed to have it, not allowed to consume it, carry it, do any of that. So that's a pretty important distinction. Another thing that we know is there's different types of chemicals in marijuana. There's THC, which is a psychoactive ingredient, which is on the screen, and CBD, which is more of the medicinal component of marijuana. So when you have this conversation with young people, always remind them that for marijuana to be medicine, it doesn't have to have THC. It's important to note that. So for it to be medicine, it does not have to have THC. Important to note here also is that the CBD that you see at grocery stores, that you see at liquor stores, any kind of thing like that, is not necessarily the CBD medicine that people consume with a prescription or that they take from a dispensary that's authorized to give medicinal marijuana. So it's important to note that, right? Because I've gone to stores and they say CBD cream, CBD for your joints, CBD for this. And it's this kind of miracle thing that everyone's talking about at the stores, right? but that's not necessarily medicine. That comes from a hemp plant, and that's a whole another hour-long conversation that I'm not going to get into because it goes for a long time. But just know that CBD can be used as medicine, but it does not have to have THC, which is the stuff that gets you high. So what is THC and how does it affect people? THC comes in different concentrations, just like alcohol. If you drink a beer, maybe it has about 5 or 6 volume of alcohol per beer, compared to vodka or tequila or any kind of hard liquor, right? There's a big distinction between the alcohol per volume, and it's the same thing with the marijuana. So marijuana that's a joint or that's kind of a smoked marijuana maybe has about 5 to 20% THC, right? Purification. But the waxes and the dabs, we're seeing them as high as 80 to 90% purification of THC. So that's like right, drinking a beer compared to drinking kind of like whiskey or unpurified alcohol, right? It's a big difference. And you can imagine as a young person, that makes a really big difference in your brain. It makes a big difference in your body as well, because they'll consume this product. Somebody else will tell them, hey man, I smoked this much, it was fine, or I did this and it was totally fine, nothing happened to me. But the problem with that is everyone has a different metabolism, right? So some people have a fast metabolism, some people have a slow metabolism, and marijuana is processed through the body differently. Marijuana is processed through fat cells and muscle cells. When I worked at the residential rehab, we had people that we would pee test them, and 30 days later, even if they hadn't used marijuana for 30 days, it was still in their system, coming out of their urine. So it's something to note, right, that this takes a long time to take effect. So what are going to be some symptoms, or what are going to be some signs that you can tell if a young person is using this? Are you going to have the red eyes, the dry mouth? You're going to have a lot of water or drinks. You're going to also see them with if they smoke, right? So if they use a lighter or if they use glass products, the tips of their fingers are typically going to be hard, because the lighter is going to be hot. It's going to be hot and hard. So it's going to make their fingertips hard. When they hold a glass product, when they smoke these products, typically it's going to be a hot glass. So they're also going to have black burn marks on their lips. So those are other things that you can kind of tell to see if they're using these products or not. You're going to see some change in memory. They're not going to forget their name or where they live, but they're going to forget small things, right? Did they take the trash out? Did they do what they were supposed to do after they told you? So things like that, you'll typically start to see. So earlier we talked about, right, the distinction. So what we also know is that 1 in 3 of the people who smoke marijuana also mix it with tobacco. So this is what we were talking about earlier. So it's important to note that we are seeing this kind of mixture of things, and it's because the wrappers have nicotine, and also because it's kind of a thing that they do. So how are they using these products? 21% of it smoked it, 15 ate it, 13 vaped it, and the other ones did different forms. But the one that we're seeing the most right now is definitely the edibles and the vapes. That's kind of the big thing that we're seeing with young people. So why is it that they're using these products? What they've reported to us is most of them use it to relax. We talked about earlier, right, that a lot of them they say they're stressed out, they feel that they're anxious, they feel depressed. And even us for adults, right? I think proper coping mechanisms or taking care of ourselves emotionally is not the easiest thing. So you could just imagine, right, being a young person, maybe this is the first time something happens to you and no one's talked to you or no one's had a conversation with you about coping skills or coping mechanisms. And now you're kind of left to your own devices to try to figure this out. Well, what we hear a lot of young people say is, well, my friend told me if I did this, I'd feel better. If I did this, my brain would kind of shut off and it wouldn't be going 100 miles an hour. So that's what we're hearing from young people when they say why they use these products. So it's important to note, right, to always have a conversation with your young person about why it is that they're using these products. Other things that are going to be signs that they're using these, you're going to hear a lot of fruit, you're going to smell a lot of fruity scents, nosebleeds, decreased usage in the way that they communicate with you, right? So they're going to talk to you differently. They're going to have a lot of sneaky behaviors. A lot of things are going to change for them. Their friends are going to change. So the people who were their friends aren't going to be their friends. People who they used to hang out with they're not really going to hang out with. You're going to see a lot of different things like that. A lot of if you look on their social media, you're going to see references to marijuana or references to things that relate to that type of lifestyle. So just important to kind of note that. And one of the always things is we always ask for you all to kind of brainstorm, right? What are positive coping mechanisms that someone could use, or even the young person? So if you want to put some in the chat, or if you want to share them with someone who might be sitting next to you, or anything like that, go ahead and do that. Always remember that when they start withdrawing, they're going to have some symptoms. So they're going to have headaches, they're going to be some sweating, they're going to feel sad, depressed, they're going to feel anxious. These are all things that they're going to feel when they're going through some of these withdrawal symptoms. So it's important to note that if you start seeing these behaviors, or start seeing some of these things, that's something that we're going to see with them. What are some of the biggest things that they can do to kind of help themselves out when they're also kind of feeling stressed or they're feeling like they want to use? Exercise. Exercise is really good for them. We know that exercise releases chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, things like that that make us feel good. And that's why exercise is actually a little addicting for some people. When we used to go to Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, when I worked at the rehab, some people would say, "Oh, I'm addicted to working out now. That's my new thing. I work out 2 to 3 times a day." Use a distraction. What we know is that a craving for something or a craving for a product usually lasts about 5 to 10 minutes. So if you can distract them for about 5 to 10 minutes, we call it the urge or the trigger, typically passes. So in about 5 or 10 minutes, that'll kind of go away. So distract them either by a phone conversation, distract them with hanging out with somebody, something, a walk, anything like that that kind of distracts them. Always set up the environment for success. We always like to remind young people and parents of that, right? What happens at home also affects them. What happens in their kind of environment affects them. People who they hang out with kind of affects them, right? So if they're hanging out with the same people who were using, the chances that they'll get better are pretty slim, right? If they're still hanging out with kids who are using and drinking and all that type of stuff. Always find solutions to stress. If it's gardening, if it's painting, if it's art, if it's poetry, let them figure out something that makes them feel relaxed, because every kid is different and every person is different. I know some people like gardening. You'd be surprised how many people would like it. The last thing is also celebrate accomplishments. So even if it's only a day or two, or if it's been a week, a day is a day, which leads to a week, which leads to a month. So any kind of small win is really good for them. So what can you as caregivers do to kind of have this conversation or to safeguard young people? Stay informed with the facts like you did here today. Always have a conversation with them about your expectations and about the rules. I've had a lot of conversations with young people, and sometimes they tell me, "Well, no one ever told me. My parents just assumed that I knew better." Right? Because that's one of the things that we as adults we think that they know. We given them all these kind of hints and all these type of ideas, but it's important that we're really straight to the point. Always try to understand why it is that they're using, right? We always we as counselors like to call it motivational interviewing. You could just call it open-ended questions. That's kind of what it boils down to. Always ask open-ended questions, right? Don't give them a yes or a no opportunity. Simple things like, what did you do today? Did you see this on the TV? How did you feel about that? Things like that that kind of get them going. If you were to do this, what would happen next, right? Questions like that. Always try to role play with them, right? So if they're going to go out to a party, if they're going to go anywhere, always try to have a moment of say, "Hey, so if someone were to offer you marijuana today, what would you say?" They're probably going to tell you, "Oh, come on, we do this every single time. This is kind of corny. I'm over it." But it's a good skill because they remember every single thing that you tell them. And always try to discuss coping mechanisms with them that are positive, right? Always try to do that. We always say when you have this conversation is always try to keep the communication lines open, because what we know about young people is everything they say now is, well, on the internet it says, well, on Google they told me. So it's always about kind of having the communication open. We always tell everyone is go easy on yourself. Most of us aren't born counselors or aren't counselors as a profession, right? So remember that you're not alone. I'm sure the principal Chini can tell you that you probably have a lot of counselors or a lot of resources at the school. that can help you out with some of these issues, right? Because you're not alone, and there's a lot of resources. We, like you said, right, we give these presentations. We also try to reach out to schools and different places. So I know a lot of the counseling centers here in Santa Clara County are also really good at what they do. Um, so the last thing that we're going to share with everybody, just so I can leave enough time for questions and things of that kind, are phone numbers. So one of the big things that we know about young people is they don't make phone calls. They all send text messages now. So they'll sit around the table, they'll be texting each other, but they won't talk to each other. So we have a few text lines here. You can take a picture of this if you want with your phone, and they can text to get some help. You can text this as well to get some resources. We also have a phone line if you'd like to call that as well. You can also get a lot of questions answered there. A lot of the information that we shared here today comes from the Stanford Tobacco Toolkit. So you can actually do a mini presentation, or if you want, you can look up information on the webpage, and then kind of go through it at your own pace, at your own time, and kind of figure out what information you want to share with your young person. Last but not least, we also have our social media and a few emails if you'd like to email us with any questions after this presentation. And with that, I will stop sharing screen and open it up for questions that anyone might have.
I also want to, Mr. Campbell, who is our associate principal that's in charge of discipline, has joined us, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to talk about some things that we've seen on campus, so that parents are aware of just some of the stuff that we've been dealing with here at Piedmont Hills.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up. Mostly I wanted to show you some of the things that we've kind of recovered this year, just so you can get to see, because I've seen these presentations all the time, and the form of the vaping that comes is almost different every single year. So I just want to kind of keep you up to date with what we're seeing this particular year. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things that we've confiscated so far, so you can see kind of a size and everything of what you'd be looking for if you are concerned about these things. Again, they're always pretty small. This seemed to be the one that was popular. We got 3 of these this year. I don't know exactly where they're coming from, but
yeah, those are the new ones.
Yeah.
That one you just showed before, that's the new one. And it's kind of like a puff bar. It's a disposable.
right.
And that one actually has, I think, if I remember correctly, about 4 times as much as a regular puff bar. So they're selling them at the liquor stores for about
No, I mean, the thing is
$15.
huge comparatively, yeah, because the puff bars, I don't actually have a bar with me, but I've got, you're looking for stuff like this for the puff bars. And again, you can see how tiny this is. Looks like the little pencils that fillers that you get for the mechanical pencils. So yeah, watch for that stuff. Let's see, what's this one? There's a good one for you.
Yeah, so that's the refillable oil
Right.
that they put into the vape pens.
So yeah, I just wanted to share with you guys what we've seen this year in particular. The concern that we have is a kid can pull out something, use it, put it back in their pocket in 30 seconds. And so they walk around a corner, they hit the bar real quick, and then it's gone, and that's it. So our ability to actually catch students doing these things is really minimal unless somebody directly is watching them and wants to report it.
Yeah, so there's some comments in the chat, like, are these from Piedmont? Yes, this is stuff that we've collected from Piedmont. And, yeah, well, I'm going to tell you right now, every single high school, this is not just a Piedmont problem, every single high school, and honestly, a lot of middle schools too. Kids are vaping on campus, certainly vaping in the bathroom. Like Mr. Campbell said, it happens very quickly. It's not like I graduated from high school in 1992. And, it used to be that, you had like the pipe and like, it was a kind of an ordeal to smoke pot, and like you had to be a lot, you couldn't just like easily do that in the hallway. Technology is something, because it is very easy to do this now. And so that's the reason we do this presentation for the parents, is so that you guys as parents are aware of what these products look like, and so that you can see at home, like, because a lot of them, really don't look like anything that you would suspect. And so that way you're aware, so that parents can help us out as well. Virginia, I like your point of sharing these with, it's especially with COVID, sharing it with students and like, yeah, like that's sharing, yeah, spit and all that stuff. We can definitely, and that's a good idea for us to plan a presentation for the students. Rupert, I know that this is something that falls under you, so let's explore ways, if we should do that during class, or I know in the past we've done like an after school evening type presentation that we've invited parents to, but maybe we can look at like the biology classes or something like that as a way to get this information out.
Yeah, definitely. That normally in the second semester, we invite students who may or may not have got TUPE related incidences, but then we invite parents and students to come in the evening. I don't know what we're going to do second semester, if we're going to have a live presentation or presentations to the classrooms. That's something between me and George we would have to figure out.
Yeah.
And just for all the parents, right? When we definitely talk about this information to the students, we always like to frame it to them in a health perspective, right? About how this is going to affect them. For you all, we gave you a lot of information about how they use it, how to detect it, how to kind of know what to talk about or kind of do. With them, it's a different conversation, right? It's a little more of, hey, so you're thinking about using this product. Let's think about your long-term, or let's think about how you might want to be when you get older, right? Because we know a lot of young people, their time span is about 2 to 3 years, right? They're not thinking about 10, 15 years in the future. And as much as we try to get them to think long-term, it's kind of hard, right? So we always try to give them short-term goals or short-term, education that they can reach or that they can do, right? Because that's another thing that we also know about young people. So just remember that when you're having a conversation with them, right? Telling them, well, what about when you're 30 or when you're 40 and they're 14, 15, they're going to say, I don't even know if I'm going to make it to 21, because we hear that a lot, right? And of course, right, we all know they're going to make it to 21. So it's just about remembering that as well when you're having these conversations with your young person.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that with teenagers, if you go too far in the future, the consequences, and we as parents know that, like we talk about like, oh, you're gonna get a job someday and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, that's someday. So like short-term consequences are usually a lot more effective. There's a question in the chat, are the consequences from the school if kids are caught vaping? Yes, of course there are. So we, of course, Mr. Campbell, who's in charge of discipline, had to step away. So I'll just cover this. But, we use progressive discipline at Piedmont Hills. So it depends on, is this the first time that they've been caught or the 5th time? So Mr. Campbell, you want to give some more details about that?
So generally, if it's the first time that we catch somebody with any of these things, whether it's a narcotic or if it's a nicotine, it's a warning and it's a call home with family, and it's more of a family matter in that kind of regard. If it's a second time, we'll often do a 1-day suspension and a referral to our social workers so that they can start looking at whether or not there's an actual addictive concern, and then it progresses beyond that. So every time after that, it'll be further suspensions and sometimes even longer.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Sylvia, you're completely right that, we as parents can talk to our kids about the consequences and why something's bad for them, and they don't always listen to their parents. I think we've all had the experience as parents where, we've been saying something to our kid and then they hear the exact same thing from somebody else. And it's like, oh my gosh. And you're like, I've been saying that to you 100 times. And but I think it's important too, even if as a parent, they're not necessarily going to listen to you, that they know you as a parent are aware of this stuff and aren't just completely ignorant and clueless about what's happening out there. I think that, I think when a teenager knows that their parent kind of knows what's happening, then that kind of, they're going to think twice about some decisions they may make, but absolutely they need to hear this information from all different sources. Thank you, Virginia, with that. We will, I'll look into that and contact you about that. Any other questions that parents have about this?
Well, another piece of information that we always like to share with people, and we typically have a handout that we give, right? When we do this presentation in person, it's always a little different, right? A little more movement, a lot of more joking, kind of thing like that. On a computer, it's a little difficult to get you to get up and move around. So one of the things that we also like to remind parents is that every kid has a different way of communicating. Some kids like technology, right? So if you find a news article, if you find something that kind of sparks your interest, send that to them via text or send it to them via whatever message way you have, and then kind of start a conversation that way, right? You can say, hey, you know what, the other day I sent you this, did you get that? I didn't know that vapes, or I didn't know that these things did this or did that, right? Always, and then, like I said, right, don't give them a yes or a no. Always ask an open-ended question. Hey, did you read in there that they found this part of the research, yada, 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 right? So something that's kind of deep into the information, just to kind of get that conversation going. Because some kids, like I said, right, they love text messages, they like technology. Other individuals, they like to see things in person, right? So they like to know, hey, how would it actually affect them, right? So it's always about figuring out what's the best form of communication for your young person. Because like my family, I'm one of 3 boys, and my mom tells me I have to talk to each one of you differently because the 3 of you are 3 different personalities, 3 different people, even though you're all my kids and we all came from the same mom and dad. The 3 of us are completely different, right? So just always remember that when you're having the conversation. Always feel that it's okay to take a break. So if you're stressed out, if you're feeling like, hey, this isn't going to end well, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? Let's take a break. Let's come back in an hour or 2, and then we'll talk again. Because right now I'm really, and it's okay to be honest, I'm really upset with you. I didn't think that you were going to use this product, and now I need to think about how we're going to have this conversation, right? Just being honest and letting them know, hey, yeah, I'm not okay, and we're going to talk about this, but not right now. Maybe in a few hours.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there was a question about routine bathroom checks. And yes, we do sweep into the bathroom. That's always something that we have to be careful about. I'm sure we certainly don't want kids to go home and tell their parents like, oh my God, the adults are always in the bathroom and they're watching us go to the bathroom because, so we always have to there's a fine line of giving students privacy when they absolutely need that privacy and doing bathroom checks. So we do sweep into the bathrooms, but we're not always in the bathroom because honestly, that's creepy. So, so definitely I'm hearing from parents, I hear you guys that you want the students to have presentations on this and get some education on this. And so we absolutely will plan that and do it. To be completely honest, like Rupert said, considering we're now at the end of October and then November and December with the breaks in November and then December with finals, that time goes really fast. So it probably will be second semester when this happens, but absolutely we will do that. If you want to, the question about the COVID notice, if you just want to hang on when we finish, I will I'll answer your question. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it's been a couple of years. We do presentations for students, but normally it's something, we definitely didn't do it last year with distance learning. So, it's something that is probably overdue for our kids to learn about all of this. So if you guys don't have any more questions, I think we can close this up. Next week, our topic is the importance of sleep. We'll be talking about sleep and how to encourage and get your child and you, because adults need sleep too, to get more sleep. But if there's, yes, if a student is caught vaping, the parents are notified. Yes, they are. Absolutely. Okay. So thank you guys for joining us today. I appreciate it. And thank you, Jorge, for being here and presenting.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you for having us. And if you have any questions, just let us know. That's what we're always here for. All right,
All right.
everyone. Have a good one.
Great. Thank you.